My name is Allison. I'm the Programs Outreach and Youth Services Manager here at Monterey County Free Libraries. Thank you for joining me today for another episode of Backyard Science. Today we are going to be talking about something that many of you have probably tried before, tomatoes. So I have tried to grow these in my backyard for a couple of years. Last year I was pretty successful, this year not so much, but my mom, who lives in a different city, a little further up north where it's sunnier, has a lot of luck growing these tomatoes. So today I'm going to talk to you about the tomato plant, a couple of facts about tomatoes. We're going to look at some different types of tomatoes, and we're going to cut one open. A lot of you might think of tomatoes like this, a nice, juicy, round red tomato. But tomatoes actually come in a lot of different colors. So I have a box here, let me see if I can hold it up, of a bunch of tomatoes from my mom's garden, and as you can see, there are all sorts of different colors. So we do have the red ones many of you are used to seeing. We've also got ones like this, where the tops are kind of green. And we have some of my favorites are the yellow ones, as well as orange ones. I really prefer yellow and orange tomatoes. You also can get tomatoes that are green. There are some varietals of tomato that stay green. Usually when you see a green tomato, you would think that it's not ripe yet, but there are some that just grow green. This one here is kind of a very dark red color, kind of like almost a brown color with some green on top. They also come in many different sizes. So you'll get tomatoes like these ones that are a little bit bigger, and then you get small ones like these little cherry tomatoes that are much smaller. They come in different shapes too. So some can come round and ovally like this. Others you might see like Roma tomatoes are kind of more of an oval. So they're all different kinds of tomatoes. This is one of the few that I was able to grow in my yard this year. So I grew about 5 in my yard this year, whereas my mom grew about 20 of these boxes. So tons and tons and tons of tomatoes at my mom's house. This is what a tomato plant looks like. So all of these here are tomato plants, and mine aren't doing too well, so you can see they're getting kind of brown, but you can still see a lot of the features of the plants. And here's a very good example. So here we have our stem, our leaves, and some flowers. So tomatoes are a flowering plant, which means that when they grow and start to mature, they develop these yellow flowers that help to pollinate the plant. And then the tomato grows out of the flower. So let me see if I can find some actual tomatoes that are growing. Like this one here, you can see the little flower top kind of right here, that little star pattern. And then the flower will die as the tomato itself grows. That one was ripe and ready. It fell right off the vine. So you can see here where the flower used to be, and now the tomato has grown out of that. Here's some more tomato flowers you can see, and those would develop into tomato plants. The leaves here, if you can see it, have veins in them. And these veins are what help to give the whole plant its nutrients and food. Going back to the flower idea, you can see here where the flower would have been while it was developing, and then the tomato comes out from that, and you pick it and you eat it. So let's cut one open. Now, before you cut anything open at home, make sure that you ask an adult for help if you're going to be handling a knife. If you have a tomato plant in your backyard and you're familiar with tomatoes, you can always just take a bite out of one if you know it's something that you like, but always make sure that you ask an adult before you start eating stuff in the garden to make sure it's okay. Here I have one of my little orange tomatoes, and I'm just going to cut it in half like that. And as you can probably see, hopefully, tomatoes have seeds inside. So there are a bunch of these little seeds. Tomato seeds are very small. They're the size of a little pinhead. And because tomatoes have seeds and come from a flowering plant, they are actually botanically classified as a fruit. So lots of people think of tomatoes as a vegetable, But like I said, because they have seeds and are from a flowering plant, they are actually a fruit. So that's a pretty fun fact. If you want to eat your fruits, you can always have a tomato. Something really cool about tomatoes that a lot of people don't know is that they were originally from the Americas. But most people these days think of tomatoes going hand in hand with Italian food. But until Europeans came to the Americas, tomatoes weren't actually present in Italian cooking. So in the whole history of the world, tomato sauce on pasta is actually a fairly recent discovery, because tomatoes weren't brought over to Italy until the Americas started being invaded by the Europeans. There are somewhere around 10,000 different varieties of tomatoes in the world, and you can tell that there are a bunch of different kinds just by this box alone and all the shapes, colors, and sizes you see in that. So that's a lot of different tomatoes. Another really cool thing about tomatoes is that tomato seedlings have even been grown in space. So you can say that tomatoes are a galactic fruit. They've been to outer space. Tomatoes really like sun. So as you can probably tell from this video, my backyard here in Pacific Grove is kind of foggy and shaded, which is why the tomatoes didn't do so well this year. They really like sunny, hot places, which is why they were thriving in the Italian climate when they were brought over, and why they do so well in their natural climates in the southern and central Americas. Tomatoes also really like long soaks. So if you have tomatoes, you have to water them and give them a nice long soak. Now, if you're like me and you're a kid watching this video, I used to hate tomatoes when I was younger. I really didn't like them. Anytime they came in a sandwich or anything, I'd take it out immediately. Didn't want tomatoes anywhere near me. But one of the cool things about growing up is that sometimes your tastes change. And now I actually really like tomatoes. I still prefer, like I said, the orange and yellow ones, which tend to have a little bit more of a milder flavor. But I would encourage you all to not give up completely on something that you don't like. So if you're not too fond of tomatoes, I would keep on taste testing them as you grow up, because you might be surprised to see that your tastes are changing. But a side note to that is I have always loved ketchup, which of course is a tomato product. It's tomato with vinegar and sugar. So there's a lot of stuff added to ketchup to make it oh so tasty on those French fries. So I hope that you learned some really cool stuff about tomatoes today. If you have tomatoes in your yard, I would encourage you to go out and give them a squeeze, give them a sniff. I love how tomato vines themselves smell. I think that tomatoes as a fruit, once you've picked it ripe, smell kind of good, but the way that a vine smells when you rub your fingers along it, to me, that is the epitome of summer. That is what summer smells like. I love that smell. If you have any questions about tomatoes and want to explore more, I would encourage you to go to your local MCFL library branch and check out some books on tomatoes, or ask a library staff member to help you do some research online. For this video today, I got some of my information from this book called Tomato by Barry Watts, and this is available in our collection, so you could check it out and learn more about the life cycle of a tomato plant yourself. I also encourage you to come up with questions to aid your research and fuel your research and your curiosity. So my question today about tomatoes, I see all these different sizes. We have one that's this big, one that's this small. I'm curious as to what is the world's largest tomato. So how much did that tomato weigh? I'm going to do some research on that, and I'll bring the answer back to you next time on Backyard Science. Speaking of which, last time on Backyard Science, when we talked about hummingbirds, my question that I was going to research was, where do hummingbirds go when it rains? And I actually did some research on this, and I found an article published by the Smithsonian that was talking about some new research about what happens to hummingbirds when it rains. And it was very interesting because it taught me that hummingbirds' feathers are actually water resistant. So it helps them to still be able to fly around in the rain. If you remember from the video, hummingbirds have to get their nectar, their food and energy source, from thousands of flowers a day to make sure that they stay alive. So even though it's raining, hummingbirds can't take a break, which is why they've developed feathers that are water resistant. They can also perform body shakes like a dog while it's raining and mid-flight, so they can shake the water off of their feathers and off of their body. Now, of course, in a heavy rain, those water droplets will mess up their flight patterns and change their patterns of flight a little bit. But during light to moderate rains, they're still able to go around and get their food. Of course, if there's something like a really big storm, or in areas where there are hurricanes, sometimes hummingbirds will hunker down inside of dense vegetation or on the downwind side of a tree trunk to protect themselves. I hope you had a great time today learning about tomatoes. I encourage you to stay curious and do some research on a topic that interests you, and I will see you next time on Backyard Science. Bye-bye, everybody.